Good afternoon. This is a meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission in the city of Laredo. Today is September the 6th. It is 6 o'clock, and I'm calling this meeting to order. First item that we have is a roll call, please.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Erasmo Villarreal.
Present.
Present. Carlos Flores. Javier Compián. Present. Raúl Ugalde. Present. Johnny Rojas.
Present.
Joe Villarreal. Daniel Lopez.
Present.
Jorge Dominguez.
Present.
For the record, Mr. Shoreham, you do have quorum.
Thank you. Joe Villarreal called me that he had an emergency, he had to leave out of town, so if we can have a motion to excuse him, please.
So moved.
Second.
And a second, all those in favor? Aye. Thank you. Next time, if everybody could please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The next item that we have is the consideration and approval of the minutes of the meeting of August the 2nd. Yes.
I don't recall being absent on August 2nd. I think I arrived late.
Okay, well, we'll make that correction.
All right, we'll look into that and make that correction.
I want to say he arrived sometime after item 8A. It was either 8.
No.
It was after 8A.
No.
Here for that one.
Does anybody else have any corrections or additions to the minutes? If not, do I hear a motion to approve the minutes?
Motion to approve subject to an amendment. Any corrections regarding when Mr. Flores?
Oh, you know what?
Commissioner
You're right. Hold on. I'm sorry. I was absent this meeting. That's
You were
right.
absent?
That's right. Sorry. Totally forgot.
Okay, so your
Motion to approve the minutes.
motion and a second. All those in favor, please?
Aye.
Thank you. Next item that we have is the citizens' comments. None seen. I would like to make a comment before we continue the meeting. I would like to thank Mr. Bratton for your service to the Planning and Zoning Commission of the city of Laredo. I know you're moving on, and we wish you the best of luck in the future. But, you know, you did a very good job, in my opinion, when you were here with us, treating the Planning and Zoning Commission, bringing your items forth and stating your case on whatever you needed to bring forth to this commission. We may not always have agreed with you, but, you know, we certainly respected your decisions.
Thank you, sir. I concur with the chairman. Thank you. It's been a pleasure, and it's been a fun 3 years working with you, and I wish you the best of luck. Thank you.
Okay, the next item that we have is a public hearing and recommendation of an ordinance. This is amending the Land Use Development Code, Article 4, Section 24.62, zoning district and boundaries, to delete the title of B4 zoning classification highway commercial district and to adopt in lieu thereof a new title and text, which new title is High Intense Community Business District, and creating a separate zoning district for the highway commercial district classification, adding a new title and text with new title is B5, Highway Commercial District, providing for publication and effective date. This is a public hearing. Anybody who wishes to speak in favor of the zone, of this particular ordinance? In favor? Well, before I ask for anybody who wants to speak against it, are there any questions from the commission for staff in terms of what they're bringing forth? Okay, none heard, then, anybody who wish.
I guess I have one question for staff. It doesn't really say it in the ordinance. I'm assuming this goes for all the properties from here going forward. Everybody that has a current B4s can use the B4s, however, they were B4s at the time they got the B4s.
Correct. Yeah, it doesn't affect the B4s that are in place at all.
Okay, it's just for any new properties from here forward,
Well,
or once the ordinance goes into effect?
no, well, wait a minute. I think if I understand your question, is if it's currently designated B4 and it's a vacant piece of property, and they want to put a bar on it after the effective date of the B5 ordinance, if it ever goes to council or gets approved, then yeah, it would affect that vacant property if they want to put a bar or a maquinita or one of these other
Yeah.
listed uses on it. So in that regard, it would, but if there's a bar there already or something already in place, they're grandfathered. I mean, they're done as far as that. The risk is that if you do have a bar in a B4 and you do end up in that grandfathering scenario, if there's a 6-month gap, then they would be looking at trying to get a B5.
And how about, for example, the CUPs that we've given?
CUPs would have to be written into the ordinance to allow the jump, but yeah, you could still do a CUP for a B4.
And would, let's say, non-conforming CUPs
Well,
receive the benefit of the grandfathering in as well?
yeah, no, I think by definition, almost a CUP is almost like non-conforming because you're going to a higher intensity in a
No,
lower
but
zone.
we've seen people that come in with operating under CUPs that they don't even conform with the conditions of the CUP, but yet they're still allowed to operate. And so wouldn't that be essentially surrendering their CUP and losing the benefit of grandfathering in for?
If they wouldn't be grandfathered because they're legally there under the CUP, okay? But for the CUP, they would not be able to have that use there. So it's not a grandfathering issue in that regard, and you can't sort of bootstrap the argument and say, well, I had a CUP all these years and now I lost my CUP, but I'm non-conforming because I was there. It doesn't work that way. If you lose the CUP, then that business cannot lawfully be there anymore. And we've had it happen, and like I said, in the time I've been here, and as far as I know in the history of our zoning, there's only been one CUP that actually got revoked, and it took 2 years to do that. It's a lengthy process because their property rights are implicated and so forth, but you are permitted to conduct that business provided you abide by the conditions of the permit. You default on those, and then you are, subject to being revoked. So I don't know if that answers your question, but.
You did. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay. All right, anybody who wishes to speak against this ordinance,
Why not?
Good evening, Rolando Ortiz with Kelm Development, and I'm here to speak against the ordinance. I don't have a long presentation. It's just, to me, an overburden on landowners. To Mr. Tejas' point, we have property that is zoned B4 along Loop 20 that we've actually changed from B3 to B4, chasing the ability to have bars with liquor. This would make us then now change it to B5, so it's an undue cost. So we'd prefer to just leave B4 the way it is. Worst case scenario would be if you're B4 today, you automatically convert to B5, and then from this point on start anew with the B5 zoning. Again, it puts a burden on property owners. You can imagine if you had sold a piece of property on Loop 20 to a Lowe's or a Home Depot with a B4 zoning, they can actually operate. If they haven't submitted their permits and this ordinance passes, they would have to then come back and change it to B5, which, they bought it with the full intention of being able to develop their property. So I would just discourage making the change completely, but if you're going to, at least put all the B4s into B5 and then start afresh from that point. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ortiz. Anybody else who wishes to speak against the ordinance?
Good evening. My name is Jerry Salinas. I'm the president of the Laredo Builders Association, and I'm here speaking on behalf of our organization against this zoning amendment. And I wanted to just go ahead and cover a couple points. I'll try to keep it brief. But basically, we're against this because we feel it is an undue burden on the building and development sector, but it goes beyond that. It goes to basically any property owner that has any of the 39 uses that are going to be included in the new B5 designation. So I think it's more effective just to give examples. One of those examples was given if somebody who went through all the proper procedures and everything to get their property zone B4. They haven't sold the property yet, but once this ordinance passes, all the uses that they were entitled to when they were developing this property to get at that B4, just overnight, all of those uses transfer to a B5, and they have to come back and go through the entire zone change process, which can be, 3 months of time, a few $1,000s minimum if you need to get an engineer involved. And so it's unfair to that landowner. Another example would be, just to pull one of the 39 uses would be like an auto repair shop. They're on this list that they have to be in a B5. There's an auto repair shop on San Bernardo. They've been there for 50 years. If they decide that they want to retire and sell their building to someone else, if they don't find a buyer, and sometimes, it can take a while to find a buyer and close on the property, get the bank loan funded, everything. Within 6 months, all they have is a 6-month window. If they close in 7 months, now that property is now permanently a B4, the use is discontinued, and so they would have to get a zone change to a B5 in order for that auto repair shop to operate as an auto repair shop. And if that zone change doesn't pass, then now you have an auto repair shop owner who can't continue to, he can't sell his building for the use of an auto repair shop, which is going to greatly diminish that value. There's another angle to this that I think needs to be addressed, which is the comprehensive plan. The city just went through a really lengthy process of adopting a comprehensive plan. Part of the comprehensive plan is to create pockets of livable areas within the city. A bar is on this list as something that is now going to be in a B5. If you create these B5 zones along highway corridors, and bars can only operate within those B5s, the concept of a neighborhood bar or a neighborhood pub kind of goes out the window, because now you're focusing all of these uses into this one corridor, this narrow corridor. And so again, I feel in that respect, it does go against the comprehensive plan, because you can't have the local car shop, you can't have the local bar, that goes out the window. The last thing I wanted to mention was just as far as the necessity for the B5. Something that I went ahead and did is I went through all the different uses, and 39 uses are going to be transferred to only B5 from the B4. So I was curious to see, okay, what differentiates the B5 from the B4? Why does the B4 continue to exist if all of these uses are transferring to the B5? And I went through it. There's 261 different uses if you combine the B4 and the B5, and only 7 of them are only in a B. If I were to go into the planning and zoning department and say, this is my use, what can I get away with, and only a B4, that would not force me to want to get a B5, and there's only 7, and they're all institutional uses. I can put them up on the screen. It's on the institutional government page. It's water supply facility, water public, water supply facility private, sewage pumping station, lift station, and a water booster station that is in a B4 but not in a B5. And then there's 3 others, which is institutional concessions only for fishing and sightseeing, retail, sales of fishing bait, and snack bars and vending machines. So basically, the B5 is the B4, but you're gonna make all these people that have these uses, you're gonna put the burden on them to go through the zone change process, to pay those fees, to wait for that time. It's a huge burden to put on the city. It's a huge burden, frankly, to put on the planning and zoning department, because they're gonna have to be dealing with all these zone changes. They're gonna have to be dealing with an increased number of special use permits and conditional use permits. I don't see the advantage. I don't know what problem it solves, but in my opinion, you're taking the B4, slapping a B5 on it, and putting all this extra workload on the city and on the taxpaying developer, builder, and property owner side. And I do want to stress that it's not just builders and developers, even though that's our organization. Anybody who owns a business and owns property with any of these uses, they're going to be affected. greatly by this. And so I just, if there's an existing problem that this zone change addresses that I'm not aware of, I'm happy to sit down with planning and zoning and discuss that, and maybe there's something that can be done, but as far as I'm concerned, I just don't see the purpose of this. And, I'm available for any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Salinas from the commission?
I have a question, but not for Mr. Salinas, just to Nathan, on one at this point.
I have a question for Mr. Salinas.
But let me recognize Mr. Flores first.
There you go.
Mr. Brandon, when he's saying this discussion about these 7 categories that he just talked about, what does he mean by that? Or what did you understand that to mean?
I'm not sure what he meant. I mean, it sounds to me like he was saying that lift stations and stuff like that are the only thing allowed in
That are gonna remain
B4, but I think he also said there are 260 some odd uses, and of those 260 some odd uses, we were just removing these. So those other uses stay there. They're also available. So I'm not sure exactly what he's referring
Sir,
to.
can you explain that again? I got
Sure.
confused.
Okay, basically, what I did was, I went down the entire list of uses, and I determined, okay, if I'm an investor and I'm going to build one of these, one of these uses, I need the land to be used for something that's in this book, right? And so I went and I was discussing why would I want a B4 versus a B5? There has to be some things that differentiate those two zones that would make me determine what zoning am I going to go for. The B5 has everything the B4 has. The B4 can, there's a ton of overlap between the B4 and the B5. The main differences are the 39 uses that they're extracting out of the B4 and say now a B5 is going to be the only zone that you can use. And so what's left in the B4 that the B5 doesn't have? And that's those 7 that I referenced, where
7 categories, you're saying?
7 uses that are all institutional. There's no, it's a very narrow focus. And I can put it on the screen and I'll show you.
Yeah, I guess that's what I'm confused about. If there was 240-something uses and we're taking out 39, wouldn't that leave 200 and something?
That
I'm sorry,
overlap.
that overlap.
B4 and B5 are they
Oh,
both?
you're talking about just B4.
Yes.
I
Like,
understand.
if you look at the screen right here,
And what are
those
they again?
4 are only B4 and not B5.
And what are they again? I'm sorry?
It's water supply facilities, sewage pumping stations, and water booster stations.
Those are all, and those would still be B4.
Those are only B4, a B5 is not allowed in those.
Okay.
And then there's 3 others, and so the only point I make is that the B5 is the B4, except these 7 were left behind for some reason that they were not thrown into the B5, right? But everything that the B4 was, the B5 is now, except for these 7. So why create it other than to throw this huge burden at everybody to have to now get the B5? Because the business is grandfathered in that is existing, but you only have a 6-month window to find another person to go in there for that exact same use. And if you're selling your building, and it can easily take 90 to 120 days to close on a property, that gives you 60 days to find a buyer in order to continue the use and for that grandfathered in to count. And so why create the B5 if the only differentiation is these 7 that were left behind in the B4? The B4 that is strictly only B4 is super narrow. That's what I'm trying to point out.
Okay.
That everything out of those 267 uses, 200 and some odd are both B4 and B5, and then these 39 are strictly B5. But the B5 is basically the B4. But now with all this undue burden, I don't know if I'm
No, it makes perfect
okay.
sense.
Sorry,
I understand.
yeah.
I guess I have a question. May I continue?
Yes.
I guess I have a question for staff. It's, the B5 seems like I understand the concept of this was that people are coming asking for B4, and there was uses in the B4 that sometimes people on the Planning and Zoning Commission felt uncomfortable about allowing them to do that. And then also the issue was that there was neighbors who would come and say, well, yeah, he's gonna get a B4, but then, we don't want warehouse and storage in our neighborhood or in our area or whatever. But like, to me, there seems to be a huge difference between warehousing, for instance, versus a outdoor movie picture theater. To me, a motion picture theater outdoor seems to suggest like some kind of like entertainment or quality of life idea, as opposed to, you know, something that is more industrial or, you know, maybe less aesthetically appealing or something.
He's essentially correct. I mean, he's correct. The B4, or the B4 that exists now would be the B5. I mean, you would be able to do everything in the B5, okay, that you can do in the B4 now. What you're doing is you're creating separation, because as you said, what happens is, since the B4 is so expansive, I mean, everything is in there. Everything is in B4. And so when you have these zone cases come in, and somebody says, hey, I really want to do this thing over here, which isn't a bad thing, and it's not going to cause any real problems. But when you look at the B4 and everything that's allowed, and you all have said this to people too, if we change that zone and you come in here, what if you don't do what you said you're going to do? What if you're going to do a bar, or you're going to do this or that? So what we did is we took those uses out there that generally don't work well in neighborhoods and around those areas, and including bars, because we've had problems with that. I mean, come to a couple of meetings where there's a bar issue and you'll hear about it. But, I mean, a commercial parking lot, okay, I mean, in a B4, we're moving it into a higher intensity zone. It's not an auto repair, it's an auto body shop, auto body repair or auto paint shop. Those are typically pretty loud, noisy kinds of things, and so you have them in a B4 butted up against a residential area, and it gets noisy. We've had it where people have come in and they've said, we want to do this, and we say, no, B4 is not appropriate there because you're too close to that. B5 would then be the benchmark, if you will, for that kind of an operation. So we've taken those, I mean, portable toilet chemical leasing, I mean, really in a B4 right next to a neighborhood or something like that, it needs to be out on the highway somewhere. It needs to be away from your residential areas, and even from your commercial areas. They probably would agree that they don't want those things there. So I'm not saying that this is a perfect list, and that's what the public hearing is all about, and that's what the commission needs to deliberate on, is do all of these things, are these the right picks, if you will. For example, one that we're looking at right now is the veterinary with outdoor. That can be pretty noisy and pretty repugnant to people who live in close to it. So you want that kind of moved out. And so when you're making that decision about whether to grant a B4, and you're thinking about all these possible things that could go in there, and you're saying, this is right next to a neighborhood, God, I wish they couldn't do these things. That's why we're putting them in the B5, so that there's that option to get those B4 uses that are more harmonious, if you will, or less problematic for either commercial development, like strip centers and stuff like that, or even around residences, to allow that flexibility. Now, is this list completely right? Probably not. I mean, we gave it our best shot, we're bringing it forward and we want comment on it. But, I mean, the intent is not to burden, the community or anything. The intent is to protect the citizenry from some of these noxious uses. I was talking to Mr. Murphy, and he brought up a good point. He said, hey, if I have a B4 with a Lowe's and they need outdoor storage, now they're going to have to come and get a B5. Well, Lowe's and those guys generally locate along highways. I mean, they don't want to be in a neighborhood, right? So maybe that there's a way to accommodate that. But that's something that you have to flesh out in the process. I mean, it's very difficult to come to you with an ordinance that's 100% satisfactory to everybody, right? I mean, it's never going to happen. So we give it our best shot. We hear the comments, and I agreed with him. I told him, I said, yeah, I see what you're saying. So how do we accommodate that? What do we do? Do we go out there and say, look, let's take a look and put a provision in there that for the next 6 months, if they're undeveloped, they're along a highway, they're this, they're that, they get an automatic, bring it to the commission, take a look at it, and say, yeah, it goes to B5, no problem. I mean, Rowley, the same thing. I mean, those guys don't do the kind of stuff that we're concerned about on a regular basis, where somebody comes in and decides they want to put and excuse me for saying this, a bar in a neighborhood. You know, we had one of those cases here recently, and by the way, it got turned down by the council.
But that was a zone 3 and they had a conditional use
Yeah,
permit
he
to
was-
operate,
he was-
or it was a
I understand.
restaurant?
I'm just saying, by
operate as a
way of
restaurant.
example,
It
by way
wasn't,
of
right?
example, in
It's
the
not-
neighborhood.
It's not, you're comparing apples to oranges.
Maybe, maybe
I
not.
guess getting back to his point is just saying that we're creating a new class, a new subdivision without doing anything different. Like, we're just moving everything. The only thing
Well,
that's
no,
staying the same
what
is.
you're doing is your B4 is now different. Your B5's got everything in it, but your B4 is different because now it doesn't allow a whole bunch of these things. That's what's really happening.
But we're not carving anything out, leaving it in B4 though. Only 7
Hey,
things are
all of
staying
these are
back.
carved out of the B4. You can't do these in a B4 anymore. You gotta do them in a B5, plus all the other stuff you can do in a
You know,
B4.
Let me make one
You're
quick
just trying to
comment. 'cause
create
as I-
some separation.
As I was, and I'm gonna recognize you just as soon as I make this comment. I noticed that a lot of the B5 use, the majority of them, what I've seen here, were M1 uses, which you sort of moved to B5.
We didn't pull anything back from the M1, sir.
No, what I'm saying is there's a
But
lot
they,
of,
yeah, they could be
there were
considered
M1
M1.
uses, and I'm seeing that now they're eligible on a B5, and an M1 use is, you know, it's usually a manufacturing district, and where a lot of these, and I'm looking at some of these that I would have a hard time seeing them in a highway frontage, you know. They're more, you know, to me, that would be better suited in an industrial type situation. But that's just a point that I noticed as I observed the new B5 zone and what was put into it. I noticed that it's all, most of it, a good percentage of it was M1, and it got moved to B5 sort of. Commissioner Dominguez, I'm sorry, I know you wanted to ask Mr. Salinas a question?
Yes,
Mr. Salinas?
I'm gonna ask Mr. Salinas, you present yourself, Mr. Salinas, good afternoon, as the president of the Laredo Builder Association. You're representing them, or you're coming on your own without them knowing?
I'm here speaking on behalf of the Laredo
On
Builders
behalf of them.
Association, yes.
And,
As the president, I myself am a builder developer, but I'm not speaking on my behalf, I'm speaking on behalf of our organization.
And one of the reasons that I ask is because you're representing a lot of people and a lot of the members of the community. And I personally feel that a B4 should stay the way it is, that we don't have a need for a B5. But I also feel that if we were to get a B5, it would be, if it becomes necessary, it might be an option to have on our ordinance. But I feel that whoever has a B4 right now should be granted an automatic B5. And one of the reasons that I feel that way is because if we don't do it that way, then we're discriminating some of the members of the community that struggle or created the option to have the B4, like Mr. Ortiz would get them, and yourself also, and not many that are here. So it might be a good idea to get the B5, but not so much because we need it right now, but we're gonna need it in the future. I feel that there's gonna be some changes in the legislation in Texas that is gonna be impacted. One of them might be gambling, the other one might be the legalization of marijuana. So those might be certain types of business that might probably be ideal for the for the B5. Right now, Mr. Brattenfield is telling us that we might have some businesses that are in the community, but also the comprehensive plan calls for that type of businesses. What we're trying to do, or what the comprehensive plan was to do, they want to create the amusement and the well-being of the community in their area. See, and I'm going to make an example. We might have some businesses along that would be San Bernardo that might go out of business, and you brought it up. If they don't sell or they don't rent those businesses, they're gonna lose their grandfather. Is that fair? Of course it's not fair. See, the other thing would be if you keep a B4, you might have someone that is gonna bring a franchise. You don't have anything to offer, so your property it's gonna go down in value because you don't have that particular B5. So the ideal thing would be to grant an automatic B5 to whoever has a B4. I know that someone could say, well, we got some B4s that are right in the middle of town. Well, we didn't grant them. And it is correct right now to start making the change, but not to hurt the owners of a B4. See, it hurts the investors, it hurts the developers, it hurts the community. And I feel that we as members of the board, we're here to look for the community itself. So I feel that, and if I'm correct, I think you feel that way too, that any B4 that is existing should be granted an automatic B5.
Yeah.
And the reason I mention
Sure.
is that we need to make a recommendation. We need to make a motion and make a recommendation to city council. Because if we don't make a recommendation, then this particular ordinance is gonna go before city council, and it's gonna get approved, and that's not right. Because that's the reason we're here, and that's the reason you're here. So we can actually bring the idea of the community and put it in writing. So we need to amend that ordinance that actually reflects the wishes of the community. Your wishes and their time that has spent here. See? So that's what I wanted to tell you.
Well, and I think that that's a very excellent point. I think you make a ton of excellent points, and I think that that might be a compromise, because our concern is if the planning and zoning department, commission, city council want to shape the city a certain way moving forward, they have every right to do so, and the LBA would do everything we could to facilitate the healthy growth, and you know, we are obviously tied hand in hand with the growth of Laredo, and our success is Laredo's success and vice versa. So we're very interested in shaping Laredo the way that council sees fit, the way you guys see fit. But all of the, and for lack of a better word, all the battles that have been fought in the past, when B4 was the option for those 39 uses, that was what every person who came up here and spoke about, what they looked at what their use was, and they said, I need a B4, and so they fought for it. And everybody that got that B4 spent time and money, it's, you know, blood, sweat, and tears in order to get that, and they thought that they were getting the proper zoning for their business use forever. And the moment this passes, the rug is pulled out from under them, and now they've had this 6-month timeline in order to find a buyer or find a renter to operate the exact same use on their property, or their zoning disappears. And that's just, we don't feel that that's fair. So maybe going forward, you know, that's exactly the way you said it. Going forward, you know, shape Laredo the way you guys see fit, but all those battles that have been fought, that's water under the bridge. Everybody did the process exactly the way they were supposed to do it to get the zoning they needed at that time. And to just take it away from them, it seems unfair. And so to grant a B5 to all B4s, because that's really what it is. The B5 is what the B4 is today. Right now is what the B5 would be. There's basically no difference.
So you as a member of the community and representing the Laredo Builder Association, what would you recommend the city council?
I would recommend what you stated, that all B4s automatically become a B5. And then going forward, anyone who doesn't have zoning would have to apply by the new ordinance, but existing B4s would be B5s so that they can continue to operate their business and manage the property the way that they thought they have as of right now.
Thank you, Mr. Sanitas. That's all I have.
I just have something. Go ahead.
Commissioner Narvaez.
As I sit here listening, I think about Laredo itself, and at this time, I don't know if there's a need for a B5. However, as Laredo grows and develops, possibly a B5 would be necessary. Now, to remove items from B4 to put a B5, you do put a hindrance on those property owners and developers. As I'm thinking, maybe a possibility is to keep the existing uses for B4, but set limitations to where you kind of remove those nuisances that you're talking about as far as it happens within neighborhoods. So, for example, you have a bar. You set a square footage limit that a bar can be used in a B4, yet you're still allowed to use a bar in a B4. In the B5, you have a larger square footage opportunity. So you still have the opportunity to use a bar in a B4. At the same time, if you want to put a 5,000 square foot facility, you have to put yourself in a B5. It's just me, I'm just thinking about as I'm listening to this, to where as Laredo grows, you are going to have to put a B5 zoning. Is it needed right now? I don't know. But to pull bars and other services out of a B4 and then have them reapply or not qualify, it is kind of a disservice at this time, but that's just sort of what I'm thinking at this time. Don't know if it makes sense or not, but that's sort of what I'm thinking.
I was, I would like to add that the Laredo Builders Association, we have an office, we have a conference room. We'd be happy to workshop this out with whoever is interested in workshopping it with us, you know, going through it line by line, seeing what effects this would have, positive and negative. We're more than happy to do that. We haven't had an opportunity to do that to this point, and we volunteer our office and our time in order to do that and get this thing right.
That's a good idea. Yeah, that's a good idea.
I just have two questions just to put on the record. Do you believe that, or do you feel that we do need a higher level of zoning, like this B5 that's bringing?
At this moment, I don't know, like I said before, I don't know exactly what problem it solves. Maybe there's a problem that I'm not aware of that we need to address, and we'd be happy to sit down and discuss that. But right now, I don't have any confidence that this would have a large impact on our community in a positive
Do you
light.
think that the change as it is right now would have an adverse effect economically to the community?
I think it absolutely would. That, without a doubt, I know it would.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Salinas, for your
Thank you.
comment. This is a public hearing. Anybody who wishes to speak against this ordinance,
Good afternoon. My name is Pat Murphy. I'm in charge of real estate development at San Isidro. We have a number of 40, 50, 60 acre parcels located on Loop 20 that through the years we have gone through the process of securing the highest possible commercial zoning to give us the flexibility to do whatever we might be presented with in a retail shopping center type situation. And if we're going to make this change, I'm going to say the same thing that Jerry and Rowley said. If we're going to make this change, we've already, we think, fought the battles to get the highest possible zoning. And if you're going to create a new zone, I would suggest, recommend that anybody that's got the B4 already, that you automatically give them the B5. I don't have the list in front of me of the 39 uses, but I saw 2 or 3 on there, like Nathan mentioned earlier. I think an outdoor nursery was one of the things. And if you're going to put a Lowe's or a Home Depot in a shopping center, well, they're going to have an outdoor nursery. I mean, these are not a noxious use that I don't think, but it's just those kinds of things on a few things on that list that we need the flexibility to be able to tell a prospective business that we can deliver a piece of property that is zoned, ready for your use. So we would appreciate your consideration.
Sure. Commissioner Flores?
Sure, I have a comment, not a question. Thank you, I don't have a question for you. What I was gonna say is, I think that just from a property standpoint, property holder standpoint, I think that what they're saying makes sense. That if you currently have a B4 and that is the most business use that you can have, that you should not lose that. I think that's right. But what this does bring up moving forward, if we decided to do this for future developers or landowners, is the fact that there really isn't a mechanism right now in place for us to be able to make intelligent choices, such as the example that they gave about Lowe's. Like, let's say you have someone who comes in under the B5, or let's say you have someone who has a B4, and then we create the new B5 that has the outdoor nursery, and this person has this B4 and they can't do this, but they want to have a Lowe's, as opposed to something that has noxious odors or something like that. There has to be a mechanism in place, I think, as a commission, for us to be able to see that and say, okay, this project is a project that's in keeping with the comp plan. This is a project that's in keeping with the zoning of the area. You know, in other words, we can't just look at it like so blindly or so, you know, incomplete. It's like, and that's kind of one of the issues that has come up in these projects before, is that, like, someone comes in and they say, we wanna go from a B1 to a B3 or whatever, and it's like, okay, well, what is the project? And it's, oh, no, we don't, we're not gonna tell you what the project is, that's to be determined later. Okay, well then how are you able to assess whether you can do the zone change or not? Does that make sense? I mean, you can't, does that make sense? Like, in other words, if you don't have information about what is the project, how can you decide whether it's gonna fit within the zone change that you want
They
or
don't
not?
necessarily have a project in mind at the time to make the zone change.
Exactly. You're trying to get the highest and
You're
best
trying to
use,
sell it,
that's what
so
you're
you're
trying to do,
trying to
so.
But the
really,
creation of this, though, is proof at this point, though.
but I think, I don't know, I think where you're headed is, it sounds to me like where you're headed is that there needs to be a lot more discussion as to what should be in a B5. And I think a lot of it has to do with what the industry can also come in and give you input on. You know, I mean, we have to look at things like, you know, is this a business-friendly community? And is this gonna make it, you know, harder to do business or not? Is it gonna be, there's some things in here that, there was a very good point made, of the comp plan. You know, we need to look at, I think, several different things that, because I see some uses in here in that B5 that I personally don't agree should be in a B5. I think they should stay in M1. I mean,
Mr. Chairman, none of these uses were in M1. These all have been pulled from the B4. Now, if you're suggesting that they need to be taken out of all of this and thrown over into M1, that's definitely something that, you know, you could look at. But I understand what they're saying, and I'm kind of thinking about it. I haven't looked at the zoning map globally, but I don't think it's a big issue. I mean, yeah, you could write into this ordinance that all current B4s are B5s. And basically, you would have no B4s in the city of Laredo. But that's not a bad idea, because anybody who wants to come in and get a zone change would then go through the test of whether it needs to be a B4 or B5, and you can do that. So, yeah, they wanna all be B5s, and they're already B4s, maybe that is a decent compromise.
well, in that case, why even change the zone?
Because then, when the new ones come in, when the new zone cases come in, you already have that segregation for all future uses, where you can now have a little bit more control over whether these are locating in that B4. And you can make that
You're talking about
distinction.
these 39 uses that are going from the B4
Well, no,
to
the B5 is gonna be the ultimate zone. I mean, it's gonna have everything in it. I mean, it's the zone of all uses. But if you don't want those uses in that new area that is coming in for zoning, you can say, hey, you really need to look at a B4. You've got that segregation, because these other less, with the exception of these uses, they're in the B4, so they don't need to do that. It's the same way we do it now. And the other thing that happens is, you get to a B4 and you want one of these uses, you still have the CUP advantage. I mean, you can go in and say, look, it's just this one thing, and maybe appropriate, may not. But that would give them the relief they're talking about, would also give you the separation between those uses and futures. Instead of worrying about future uses coming in for B5s, we're just going in the other direction. We're saying you got B5s, future uses now are going to be differentiated between B4 and B5. So
I get what you're saying, but
I mean,
guess my question would be,
it's not a bad compromise.
is there a rush? Or should we not have a workshop with the industry?
Oh, it's completely up to the commission. I
think we should put a workshop together with the industry, and let's discuss these issues. Let's discuss what should be the B5, how properties that are vacant right now with the highest use of a B4 should be moved to the B5, so that we can craft an ordinance that makes sense to everyone, and so that this community can, you know, say, hey, we got some sensible order and new uses that'll be in the future, but at the same time, we have pieces of property that, you know, have the most and the highest intense use, which will continue that way because they're vacant at this point, and you're marketing them at that point in the same way.
We have, Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry for interrupting you.
No,
I'll be
go
very
ahead.
brief, Carlos. We have in the audience, I would say about 80% of the people that are doing the industry and the development here in Laredo. And we heard their voice that they would rather go on a B5, or the B4 becomes a B5. So if we were to have a workshop, we're gonna have the same people that are here present, and we're gonna go ahead and hear the same thing that we heard right now, that they would like to have the B4s become a B5. B5, it's good, but B5 is good for something that is gonna be created. So I feel that when they develop more area, they're gonna have to come and show that they need to be on a B5, otherwise we will not give them the B5. But the existing B4s are also, even if we give them the B5, they're gonna be choked, Mr. Chairman, because there's some businesses that will not be able to comply with the requirements of the business, of the building department. So they might have a B5, but they won't be able to use because of the parking spaces, or because of the area, or the proximity.
Normally, when you go to the highest intent zone in a business zone, it's usually a large piece of property that can be, engineered to where it does work.
Different zones.
But on this particular case, what we're trying to do, we're trying to work with the community and not to discriminate or to hurt anybody that has a B4.
That I agree with. I agree with that. I mean, so I guess my question goes back, do we really need to go to a B5?
Can I comment?
Yes.
I think that we do have to, but I think that this is a first draft of something that is really part of a larger discussion. I think Jerry's really the one that kind of alluded to it earlier, which is that, for instance, right now in the current B4, we have a halfway house for criminals and bars, all in the same category. Okay, and that, to me, like right there, like that screams to me like those are so different from each other. How could this possibly be the same type of, zoning? And what I think we need to do is, I think we do need to have a workshop, and I do think that the industries that are the developers and the construction companies have to be involved in it, but I also think that we have to include in there matching this up with the vision of the comp plan, right? Because, and I also think we need to define what these B1, B2, B3, B4, or B5s are gonna be, like, give them a definition, like, B1 is gonna be these types of businesses, it's gonna be these types of services, and that's why it's a B1, and that's why they're all together as a group, and they make sense. And then B2 will be another group that'll be like, this will be this group, and we don't have the comp plan here attached, we usually have copies of it, but just the way that the comp plan categories are defined, that gives a good sense. It's like low density residential, or medium density residential, high density residential, and then like those other ones. And I think that these B zonings have to connect with that.
With land use, of course.
The land use and the comp plan. So I think that we're not ready to vote on this. I think that we should table it and ask for a workshop.
Okay.
But I think we need to have a lot more stakeholders than just the business community and the development community. I think we need to have the comp plan people here. I think we need to have, a good mix of people to help us to come and identify what these categories are and mean.
So, Commissioner Davis?
My only request would be, and I agree with Commissioner Flores and everybody here, that it should be tabled or rejected, or if we have to give a thumbs up or a thumbs down, it should be rejected as is. But the whole idea, I disagree that we should look at the B4, B5s. I think everybody needs to look at all the different uses instead of just B4 and B5, because there's some uses that some people may think should only be in M1s. There's some that are in B1s or only in B3s that should be moved down to be allowed in B1s. And so I think it should be something that it's a broader picture, because if we just redo the comp plan, you should look into the difference between all the uses. Because I agree with Mr. Salinas, there are some bars, there's a difference between a bar and a nightclub. Like in most big cities, you have a neighborhood bar at the end of the street, but unfortunately here in Laredo, not all bars are bars, they're essentially nightclubs.
Restaurants or nightclubs?
Yeah, well, some of them turn into after a certain hour.
What's a cantina?
Well, go 2 blocks. So I think it's something we should look at
Study better.
everything,
Do a
but
better
not
study
just
on all the
limited
zoning.
to B4s and B5s.
We are seeing it here with items that come, they come often where they don't comply with the comprehensive plan, staff cannot
Well,
support.
the other problem is that we're adding in another layer of another zoning when we can't even enforce the ones we have now. We don't have the manpower. We've had numerous CUPs that have never been in compliance, and we're here renewing them because everybody feels bad to say no to people, but we have legit people coming here speaking on behalf of everybody, but they're not the ones that are non-compliant. But we should look at everything, like I think it's
Take a
more than
look
just
at the whole
before.
ordinance, all the different categories, all the
different
categories. I agree. Have a workshop on all of it with, input from a lot of different areas.
I just want to mention, Commissioner.
Yes.
With Commissioner Tellez, the recommendation, I think that we need to be careful. If we table it, that's fine, I don't have a problem with that. But we need to make sure that this draft doesn't get to city council, because actually on this particular draft, we're saying that we, the planning and zoning commission, recognize that this zoning classification authorizes so on and so
I
forth.
think at this point, if we table it, I'm gonna ask, Nathan, I mean, if the commission decides to table this to have further study on it, that's where it's gonna stay. It's not gonna go to council.
Of course.
Yeah, that's where it's gonna stay. So I think if we've heard input from the community, and I think we're ready to see what the commission wants to do with this. I think we've had some good ideas as to what still needs to be done with this thing.
I would like to make a motion, if I may. I'd like to make a motion to close the public hearing and actually recommend city council that any existing B4 be granted an automatic B5 to avoid any burden to the investors, developers, and general community. That would be my motion, based on what the public has brought before us.
Okay.
I think that's
Your motion.
That's my motion.
Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye, please.
Aye.
Okay. All those against? All right, motion fails.
Can I make a motion?
Yes, sir.
I make a motion that we table this item and that we organize a workshop that involves all of the stakeholders that can give us input on how best to designate these zoning areas and bring them in compliance with the comp plan.
Second. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor of this motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those against? One against. Okay. Motion carries. All right. The next item that we have is a public hearing and recommendation of an ordinance requiring the city of Laredo's participation in the development of a neighborhood association. This is a public hearing. Anybody who wishes to speak in favor of this ordinance? Thank you. Anybody who wishes to speak in favor of this ordinance? Anybody who wishes to speak against this ordinance? Against this ordinance? If not, what are the wishes of the commission?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I did have some questions that I wanted to clarify with the
Sure.
board. As I was reading through the ordinance, on criteria for recognition of neighborhood association on the second page, under number 2, boundary, it still says that we have a registered city neighborhood boundary map.
Mhm.
Will that actually get registered, or is that something that was just left in there from the?
Well, that was, if you notice, there is a map attached to the
But
ordinance.
it's not registered with the,
Well, but as
with the city
the
clerk.
ordinance gets approved,
Will we register
that is
that?
part of it, that would be a registration for it, yes. That's how you would define the neighborhoods. I believe it's 29, something like that.
Well, I think those were the 29 old ones, and then everything north of, that
After that, it
doesn't
would
count
be
the
new
newer.
ones that would come in.
Yeah.
Or those that, those are identified, those identified boundaries are there for those old neighborhoods. But anything new, can still come in and,
Draw their own boundaries?
We
or is that
can,
recognized?
well, they're easier to work with because, for example, like San Isidro, it's a development. You have Winfield's a development.
right.
Del Mar's.
They
Del
sort of
Mar-
have identified boundaries, sort of.
Yeah, Del Mar A, B, and
Yeah.
C have their own boundaries.
Okay. But that would be it. Any other comments from the commission on this ordinance?
There was more.
Yes, go ahead.
Well, I guess just maybe just briefly on this, do we want to attach that map to this?
It's right here.
Yes,
Oh, it's already?
it's on here. Yes, go ahead.
Okay, Mr. Garcia from Community Development suggests that we change on this section, filing of application for recognition status. On the 4th page, letter C, it says that the permit official will have 21 days
What section?
to approve.
Uh-huh.
He's recommending that we do 30.
21 to 30?
Yes.
Honorable Chairman and members of the Commission, Arturo Garcia. I just read it real briefly, first time I've seen it, so I really don't want to comment. It was just notes that I was writing for her real quickly, briefly. If I may be allowed more time to read it slowly and understand it. I haven't seen the map or the attachment that you guys have, so I'm a little bit unaware of it. It sounds pretty positive in the sense of what it's trying to entail, which is trying to consolidate neighborhood and access and reach to neighborhoods, and for them to have access and reach to us to disseminate information. So it seems positive in that nature, but if I just haven't had a chance to look at it
Yeah,
myself.
Mr. Chairman, I mean, I spoke to him before the meeting and all that. Very positive attitude. I think he probably, I can't speak for him, but I believe that they think that it's properly placed at CD.
Yes.
But what I would recommend to you is that you also do the same with this that you did with the other, maybe bring it back in 2 weeks. Give him a chance to work also with the neighborhood maps, because he's not had that opportunity. I think this thing is being viewed very favorable by all people involved, and I don't think there's any really contentiousness about whether or not it should happen. I think everybody's in the same general frame of mind that it's a good thing, but again, haste can create some pretty unintended consequences, and I think it probably is advisable to give him a chance to meet with the planning staff. He's also going to have a sense of some of those neighborhoods that aren't on that map, and be able to lend guidance with that as well. I mean, and let them collaborate, and they maybe come back with a bit more broad map. I mean, like you're identifying San Isidro and these other areas, so you'll have those areas of commonality for those neighborhoods more efficiently designated. So I would recommend to you that you're there, Commissioner Flores, but sometimes if you get too much in a hurry and you move something forward and it's not quite baked,
Okay.
it's not a good thing. That's my recommendation. I know that's a bit of a disappointment, but
I fall in line with Mr. Nate.
Well, I do believe that, I mean, it probably appears that your department's gonna be the one that's gonna be administering this particular ordinance, and I do agree that you do need to look at it and maybe have a little bit of input.
Something like this would be looked at favorably from our side of it. We do a lot of outreach for the neighborhoods, and having somebody to reach out to and gather everybody in the neighborhood to make contact with them and get input would serve our department and the city as a whole. And vice versa, for them to access for information that they might need and have a point of contact for them to make it more easily, readily accessible. So, but you could just allow me just to kind of hash out, brainstorm with my staff and also with planning, so we can just hash out, like, I did see that 21 day. I said, whoa, that seems a little bit too quickly in my eyes with all the stuff that kind of goes on a daily basis.
Okay.
Can we have Ms. Castillo finish giving us her thoughts?
There's 3 more things.
Yeah.
So on that same page, on letter D, number 2, it says that the city manager designee shall make a ruling on the appeal within a reasonable period of time after the appeal has been filed. Do you want to put a number on that reasonable amount of time, or do you want to leave it subjective like that?
I think 30 days.
30 days. On the following page, under responsibilities of recognized neighborhood associations, letter C, it says, hold at least 1 general membership meeting per year for which it makes a reasonable attempt to give prior notice to residents and places of business within the boundary regardless of membership. Do you want to be descriptive on reasonable attempt, or do you just want to leave it vague like it is?
I think that wording is good. the way it is. It's
The way it is, you don't want to say that it should be written or email or mail.
every one of the associations that would get formed, will probably work in different perspectives.
Okay.
So I think as long as there's language there that allows them to do something.
Okay. 2 pages down, under services available to recognized neighborhood associations. On letter E, it says written notice to the official representatives of the recognized neighborhood association by both mail, electronic mail and regular US mail. Should we do and or you want to do both? And or. And that's all for me.
That's a good question. I think it should be both.
You want both?
We don't usually send out written notices when we post agendas or anything like that.
Right.
Right. Right. But we also don't have people from the neighborhoods showing up to the meetings either.
Well, we don't have anyone unless they have an item.
Exactly.
To the meeting.
And the idea is to be more inclusive. So I think sending a written notice to them. I guess part of the
Oh, we
issue is that
talked
some,
about
I get,
electronic.
like, isn't that some, like, couldn't someone's email, like,
I think and/or, because I'm thinking of the cost of the mail. The stamp.
Or even how effective, because remember, our notices go out on Monday
Yeah,
for
that's
the
what I was
Thursday
gonna
meeting,
say.
so
I'm
you're
not
not gonna
sure
get
how
mail
fast.
notice, so like
Yeah.
it has to be something electronic. We had talked about this the last time.
Postage is expensive,
Yes.
and/or should be.
Like either notify them electronically.
Yeah, and or.
That was it for me.
how about forming like a Facebook page for the neighborhood associations?
I think that's doable once you pass the
One
ordinance.
central place that
Sure.
if
Something
you
that
wanna
community
know.
development will cook.
But is there
Let's
anything
put
you're
it-
telling you you can't do it?
No, I think it's doable. I think, if this ordinance passes and then there's a department that will probably be community development, you could probably put,
Honorable Chairman, Commissioner Arturo Garcia with Community Development. Yes, we typically now with all the social media, that would be something typically tied into any, so I would just leave it open-ended with any other processes or availability to make it easier for us to access them. Twitter, whatever the case may be, just
any other
whatever
means of
resource.
communication?
Whatever that
Social media.
association decides to.
Any other
to
means of
do.
communication?
Electronic, you just put electronic means, because you're making this an ordinance and
Yeah.
you gotta leave this as
Electronic
broad as
media.
possible for them to be able to
Right.
comply with it. Because otherwise the meeting isn't.
So instead of
isn't
instead of electronic mail, say by electronic means.
Electronic means, whether it be
And or regular US mail.
messaging or mail or
Okay.
whatever, like,
That would be better.
Okay, so you,
Not limited to.
yeah.
but not,
That's good.
okay.
because if they don't do it, then they come back and say, we didn't give them proper notice on an agenda item, and then we gotta redo the whole thing again.
I make a motion that we table the item to allow the Community Development Department to review the ordinance and bring it back in 2 weeks.
Okay. We have a motion, we have a second and a second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Next item that we have is the, request preliminary consideration of the Stanford Heights subdivision plat. The intent is residential. It's 19.4 acre site. It's located north of Jackman Road and east of Casaverde Road. The zoning for this 107 lot development is R1. The tract is in District 5. The proposed action is approved subject to the following comments from planning, engineering, water and utilities, traffic, parks and leisure, and a notice to developer from planning.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. Frank Estrada with Sherfy Engineering. We concur with staff comments.
Okay. Now, I do want to, I know that you attached to our particular communication, there was about a list of how many people that were,
It is all
there's a
20
petition here,
All
huh?
28 residents that live on Lucia Court
That were,
that are against using Lucia Court to extend through Stanford Heights.
okay.
There's 28 housing building units.
All right. Okay.
From the previous time we came before the commission, we took your comments into consideration. And we brought forward the whole 19.4 acres with the 2 connections, taking your comments that we
Yep.
took from the previous people.
And I think the comment that most of those residents had, they were a little concerned because of that, street with, a lot of the development trucks going through there, through Lucia.
Through Lucia, as far as the construction trucks go.
Yeah.
Did speak to the owners, to the clients, and they have no problem with keeping the gate closed during construction until construction is complete. But once everything's complete, we want to open up everything for circulation.
That would be after the construction of the improvements and the houses.
Not the houses, just the construction of the roads.
Could we somehow put a plat note in there? I don't have a problem with residential traffic. I do have, I think the concern that these people have was mostly commercial traffic going through there. I mean, as you're gonna do construction of residential, you're gonna have, you know, cement trucks and pour foundations and stuff. How could we make those trucks come in through, off of Casa Verde, Frank?
It's pretty difficult to control that, only because you don't have all 107 lots that get sold at the same time.
Yeah, I know.
So you're not gonna have the development completely being built all at once. Initially, that's something that could be controlled and asked as per the builders that purchased the lots. But at some point in time, the development's gonna slow down, and at that point, the control of the traffic and circulation and where they're entering and exiting is gonna be very difficult. I don't know if a plat note is something that's going to be able to suffice that, because that stays on there forever once it gets recorded. But it's something that we can attempt to control initially. But at some point in time, like I said, that the lot sales will slow down. Hopefully not. Hopefully it comes through pretty quick. But the thing is that we would like to open it up to circulation. The client has no problem during construction of the actual project, the roads, the water, the sewer, the storm sewer. But after that, we want to open it up for circulation. And I understand your point as far as not having the building trucks, not the cement trucks, all the builders going to and fro through there. And that can be, and like I said, initially, that can be something that can probably be addressed, but I just don't see how it can be controlled through a plat note. It would just have to be a good faith effort, as they've done, you know, so far to this point. They've done as much as they can to this point. We're coming through, we had 14 acres initially. We're coming through with the full 19.4 acres, no longer commercial, it's all residential. And we're still gonna maintain that close during construction, but thereafter, you know, we can only control it so far.
Yeah.
Isn't that normal to have, when you're constructing the homes, to have traffic through residential? That's not, I mean, that's common. It happens.
In every
subdivision that happens.
When you're the first one in a subdivision, you deal with that as they build the back out.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Mr. Castillo? No?
Good evening, Commissioner. Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Robert Saldana. I'm an attorney representing the developer. I'll be brief. I just wanted to point out and highlight some legal aspects relevant to the application and the approval that we're asking for. The first case I would cite is the local government code, section 212.005, which states that the municipal authority responsible for approving plats must approve a plat that satisfies all the applicable regulations. And I believe that that's the case, Mr. Bratton. The discretion of a governmental authority approving a subdivision is limited. And once all the rules are satisfied, the approval process is simply ministerial in nature. And local governments are not granted wide latitude on that. I'd like to cite the case of Stolt versus the County of Guadalupe. It's from the San Antonio Court of Appeals. It deals with the county, but the rules for the city are the same. In that case, the court overruled the county's denial of a plat, which met all the state and local requirements, even though because the county felt that the number of driveway cuts on the public road were excessive, which is similar to the objections raised in this case, traffic. The court went on to say that a county lacks any inherent authority to reject a plat based on public health and safety, and must base any denial on statute or properly adopted county regulations. A county could adopt rules dealing with access issues, but not having done so, the plat must be approved once the county determines that all of the applicable rules in place at the time have been satisfied. In addition, there's a Supreme Court case, Dykes versus the City of Houston, 406 Southwest 2nd 176, which holds that a purchaser that purchases property adjacent to a subdivision, which has a reference to a subdivision plat in a public road, that purchaser has private easement rights. And to deny that owner access to his property and to deny a plat based on that is the same as a taking, which would require compensation. The subdivision we're talking about is the New Vision subdivision, Phase 5. In that, the road is shown, Lucia Court as a public road. In addition, Lumar, who was the developer of New Vision, it was a party to an access agreement filed in 2015 with Emilio Jackman. And in that agreement, Lumar agreed to move a 15-foot easement to the middle of the property as a 50-foot public road, which became Lucia Court. And that's a record in volume 3764, page 407 of the Webb County Official Public Records. Now, my client, the applicant, he purchased the property in reliance on both the Phase 5 New Vision plat, which says public road, and that access agreement, which said that that 50-foot right-of-way, which became Lucia Court, is a public road. And he's adjacent to that, and he has the right to go through that. And to deny him that right, like I previously said, would be akin to a taking. I don't know if Lumar told the lot owners that Lucia was always going to remain a private road, but that's an issue that those lot owners should take up with him. And I don't think it's fair that our client should be prejudiced by anything that Lumar might have told those lot owners. You know, this happens all the time. You have a subdivision that gets platted and developed, and it's the first one. And then over time, the back gets developed, and there's going to be traffic. And, you know, it's just a part of the way development goes. And to deny a plat in this case, based on the objections of these lot owners, I think would set a bad precedent. In the future, it might stymie future development. So you might have issues raised in that respect as well if you deny this preliminary plat. And again, this is only a preliminary plat, and you know, in good faith, we're willing to close the gate during the construction of the subdivision improvements. We're not required to, but we're willing to work with them. And if the traffic becomes so bad that it creates a nuisance, there are remedies that the lot owners would have in that event. But again, I don't foresee that happening.
Okay. Well, I mean, certainly I do want to say that you guys, are doing a good faith effort to try to do things the correct way, to kind of say, hey, we want to make sure that we've got good neighbors coming in and that kind of stuff. And I applaud you for all the efforts you've done. I know that you've gone back and you've redesigned and you've done a lot of things. So, I mean, from your end, you've done a lot of good faith in terms of being a good corporate citizen and bringing good faith. So, first of all, I want to thank you for all those things.
Thank you.
Okay. Now, I guess, do you have anything further that you want to add, or?
I just want to conclude by saying that we've met all the requirements
Yes,
for
you
the
have.
plat.
Yes.
And that approval at this point should just be a ministerial
Yes.
process. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let me make a comment.
Yes, sir.
I know you were very well prepared, and I'm even afraid to make a motion now. But the members of the community, they have a homeowners association, and to answer what you told us and what you educated us, they bought a piece of land where they're going to live, and when they sold them that piece of land, they said, this is going to be your land, and everything around you is going to be fine. You're not going to be bothered, and when you get back from work, you're going to be happy, and your kids can walk around without any problem. And you're going to be secure. See, when your client bought that property, if he bought it, or he owned it before, he should have asked. They should have got together with the people to see how they were going to get affected. See, you are correct what you brought before us, but also there should be on the developer and the engineering area, they should create the entrance for construction avoiding Lucia Court. Why? Because as it is right now, that subdivision is existing for only 2 years. There, we have seen deterioration of the street, of the asphalt, as it is. So once the developer, your client, complies and finishes all the development, see, he's not gonna go back and patch the road, because that doesn't belong to him, see? He used a right to go through that property and break the asphalt, because he wanted to make money out of it, because that was the law, see, the law that you brought before us, see? But that doesn't have the residents there. They're still there with a bunch of traffic and all the asphalt torn apart, because somebody decided that they didn't have control of the construction. We're not asking to open the gate just because we want to be the bad guy. We're asking to protect that section of the community, the same way that we will protect other sections of the community. So what you brought before us is good. What I'm using is the logic, and I'm using the right approach to help the community. So, in my case, I would probably make a motion to, which I'm not doing it, but I would probably make a motion that we get assured by the developer that all the construction crews will go through Messi instead of going through Lucia. And then we'll open the gate. See, I see your point. I see the point of the developer and the owner and the engineer, see? But we need to look at the point of the community there. That's what I wanted to say.
Well, I certainly see your point as well, Commissioner, and I sympathize with any lot owners that were told that there was never gonna be any development around there. That's in fact what they were told. Unfortunately, the person who told them that was not correct or didn't have the authority to say that, or misrepresented or misled the lot owners. So I understand that point of view, but where we're coming from, all I have to go by is what the law says. And I'm here to tell all of you that we will act in good faith and we will try to minimize any damage to the road. And to the extent possible, we will use the other entrance.
How would you minimize the damage? You see, you're not prepared to answer that question.
I think excuse me, I'm sorry. I think the question was answered already when Chairman Villarreal asked. The entrance we're going to be using is along the other side. We did loop it. We came forward with the 19.4 acres. And so we have the entrance along the existing Lucia Court, and we have the new entrance that will be built. That's where the construction will be coming in and out of, not through there. And we will minimize the amount of construction flow, traffic that goes through there.
Thank you.
I just think as a matter of reference, it's not the weight and the traffic that causes the damage in the asphalt, it's the water. So unless you can fix it, the rain, maybe. The water.
Okay, thank you all very much. Thank you. What are the wishes of the commission?
Make a motion to close public hearing, support staff's recommendation, and approve the proposed action subject to the comments.
Second. Do we have a second? Second. And a second?
Are we gonna add to that, Commissioner, I'm sorry?
No, my motion is as is, the way that it's stated. That's the motion. I mean, if nobody wants to vote for it, nobody has to vote for it. That's just,
All
my
right,
motion is.
we have a motion and we have a second.
Yeah.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, motion carries. Thank you. The next item is the preliminary consideration of the replat of lots 5 and 6, block 1 D&J Alexander subdivision, unit 8 into lots 5A and 6A. Block 1 D&J Alexander subdivision, unit 8. The intent is residential. Purpose of the replat is to join 2 small lots into 1 larger lot. The proposed action is approved subject to the following comments from planning, water and utilities, Webb County, and the notice to developer. Terra South Engineering, are you in agreement with the comments, sir?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. My name is Gilberto Gonzalez from Terra South Engineering, and we agree with staff comments.
Thank you. Thank you. What are the wishes of the commission?
Motion to approve, subject to the following comments.
Second.
A motion and a second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, the next item that we have is the preliminary consideration of the replat of lots 1 and 2, Block 1, San Isidro West Subdivision, Phase 5 into lots 1A and 2A, Block 1, San Isidro Southwest Subdivision, Phase 5. The intent is commercial. The purpose of the replat is to relocate the back of the property line between lots 1 and 2, Block 1. The proposed action is approved subject to the following comments from planning, water and utilities, and a notice to developer from planning. Good evening, Mr. Torres.
Mr. Guerrero, good evening, members. Rodolfo Torres from Tech Engineers. We represent the owner and we agree with the comments.
Thank you. What are the wishes of the commission?
Motion to approve, subject to the following comments.
Second. A motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye. Motion carries. Thank you. Yes.
On item 8A, I'm gonna have to recuse myself, so I'm gonna step out.
All right. This is the preliminary reconsideration of the plat of the new trade center phase 2. The intent is industrial. This is a 49.84 acre tract located west of FM 1472, north of Trade Center Boulevard. Zoning for this 10-lot development is M1. The proposed action is approved subject to the following comments from planning, engineering, water and utilities, and a notice to develop from planning.
Good evening, members of the commission, staff. Edward Ochoa with CEC, and we concur with staff's comments.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Wishes of the commission.
Motion to approve, subject to the following comments.
Second. Motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye. Aye. Motion carries. The next item that we have is the request for final consideration and replat of lots 214 and 215, Block 8, Regency Park, Section 2, Unit 1, subdivision plat, into lots 215-A, Regency Park, Section 2, Unit 1, subdivision replat. The intent is residential. Purpose of the replat is to join 2 small lots into 1 large lot. All right. The proposed action is approved. Okay.
You just lost a quorum.
Mr. Flores is back there.
Where?
He just.
1,
I'm seeing.
3, 4, 5. Okay, we're good. We got 5 right now. Okay. What are the wishes of the commission on this? The proposed action is approval.
Motion to approve.
A motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you. The next item that we have is the final consideration of the plat of Pinnacle Industrial Center, FM 1472, Phase 2. The intent is industrial. The proposed action is approval.
Mr. Chairman, I was just going to mention that this item, 9A, 9B, 10A, 11A, 11, they're all finals with no comments.
Yeah, we'll take them all right after we did, since I already got this one.
Yes, sir.
What are the wishes of the commission? I don't think there's any questions for the engineer, is there?
I still have something to say, though.
All right.
All right. Jed Gilpin for the record, and I do concur with staff's recommendation, but I especially wanted to come down here because it's Nathan's last meeting and thank him for a lot of good years of service. A lot of people might not realize how long he's been around, but in the old days when the commission was first getting started, there was a lot more controversy than there is now, if you can imagine that. And we had to have an attorney here from the city attorney's office, and Nathan was that attorney. He served for 10 years as a commissioner and subsequently the planning department director. And a good part of those years, I really didn't like him. And I especially didn't like Keith, the previous planning department director. But thanks to Nathan, I found a way to get along with them and learned a lot from both of them over the years. And I wanted to come down here and thank him for Not only his good years of service, but for me personally, it's been a tremendous benefit to me. I've learned so much from him, and I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay.
Motion to approve?
Second. And a second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
I make a motion to hear items 10A through 11C together.
Yes.
And a motion.
Second.
Second on that one, right?
So I have a motion and a second, all those in favor? Aye. All right.
You need a motion to approve items 10A through 11C.
Is that your motion?
Yes.
Approve?
To approve.
Second. And a second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you all very much.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Yeah, we adjourn.
Yeah.